name's Tom McGee, and I'm glad to see all of you here. And I want to welcome you and thank you for taking some time out on your Saturday and your weekend to come and join us. I think we'll have a nice, enjoyable talk with Richard today, and we're so glad to see all of you here. Just to say a little bit about Richard. Richard has really developed his skills as a speaker over the last few years. But he didn't start speaking until he was 3 years old, so there was something simmering there. He's been talking ever since. But just to let you know, he's also a very good listener, and he's helped a lot of people over the years by listening from the heart, and he looks into the souls of those who he sits with, which is a really wonderful and beautiful skill. And Richard and I have worked together since 2006, putting on retreats and workshops for men. And we both work with men and women in our counseling practices and continue to try and help people to live a more quality type of life. Richard has been working on this talk called Braving the Wilderness, and I'm just so glad to introduce him as a friend and a colleague and a co-conspirator. So here's Richard Palmer.
Welcome, everybody. Yeah, thanks for braving the wilderness and getting here today. I know some of you made a great effort to be here, so thank you. You cannot belong here until you are known. You cannot belong here until you are known, and you cannot be known until your watermelon heart splits open and the red blood juice and the little black seeds pour upon the earth. It is the song of your broken open heart that nourishes and seeds the dream of the village. Sing your song. Sing your song, oh brothers and sisters of the heart. Sing your song. Sing it loud so our sons and daughters may find their own song and the village can dance again. Everything wants to dance. Everything wants to dance. Mockingbirds, morning glories, mustard bloom, one-legged chicken, mollusks, moles, and the red dust. Everything wants to dance. Everything wants to dance when men sing their songs from their broken, open hearts. So that's really what the entire talk rests upon, is this idea. We're calling this talk Braving the Wilderness. And braving the wilderness, well, I want to turn that over to all of you too to help me. What does that mean? This book of Brene Brown's. Anybody seen Brene Brown on a TED Talk? Yeah, she's fabulous. She has a book called Braving the Wilderness, and collectively we'll define what that means. But I want to go back to that line in the poem where the watermelon heart splits open. That came from a dream of mine. And I actually had a watermelon heart. And in the dream it split open. And the red blood juice and the little black seeds poured upon the earth. And I thought, I think that's worth writing about. So one of my ways of braving the wilderness is writing every morning and listening to that wilderness that I would call the dream world. And then there's another wilderness, the natural world, that one of the reasons why I live in Ojai is because I'm out in that wilderness every day. But I'm curious about what your wilderness is and why Brene Brown references that idea of braving the wilderness. Well, let's go to Carl Jung's idea of the tension of opposites. And Another way to talk about the tension of opposites is the word paradox. And Jung said that paradox is actually one of our most precious spiritual possessions. And he went on to say that only paradox comes anywhere near comprehending the fullness of life. Only paradox comes anywhere near comprehending the fullness of life. And so his idea of the tension of opposites is this paradoxical idea of holding, for instance, authenticity and belonging. Authenticity and belonging. And we live in a culture that's very difficult to be authentic if we're busy belonging. And guess what happens to our belonging after a while? If we're slicing off pieces of our authenticity. It's not belonging anymore, it's fitting in. Okay? So, that's really what this idea of braving the wilderness is all about, is what would it be like to actually be willing to stand alone in your own wilderness long enough to meet other wacky, poetic, artful, system-bucking, sacred outlaws, I call them. I bet we got a room full of them here. Why else would you be here? Huh? So the boy, here's where we want to talk about the boy and the man, which Tom and I have been, welcome, come on in. Tom and I have been working for the last decade, maybe 12 years, and really working this territory of the boy and the man. And when we say boy, we really are talking about the wounded boy. And because there's many women in the room here, we're talking about the wounded girl, okay? So the wounded boy doesn't even know about paradox. It would be a contradiction. And he hates contradictions. It's either or, so he would choose either authenticity or belonging. He would choose wildness or responsibility. He would choose love or power. He doesn't like the tension of opposites. And I want to go back to Jung's quote, only paradox comes anywhere near comprehending the fullness of life. Has anybody seen Bruce Springsteen's on Broadway? It's so good. If you haven't seen it, please see it. Why do I mention that? Well, I just saw it. I happen to love Bruce, too. I mean, how do you not love Bruce? He's the blue-collar soul man. And he says that 1 + 1 = 3. He says 1 + 1 = 2 in the grind of life. And we all know about the grind. So I took that to mean that he knows something about holding paradox, the tension of opposites. And that's the magic zone. So, Brene, it's really a good read. I really recommend it. Braving the Wilderness. What's the subtitle? The Quest for True Belonging and the Courage to Stand Alone. And Tom and I have really benefited from a lot of her wisdoms. Last summer, we did a retreat on vulnerability. Some of you have seen her talk about that, and shame. In the very beginning of the book, she quotes one of her favorite people of all time, Maya Angelou, wonderful poet, almost as tall as me, formidable. Maya said this very powerful but strange thing that took her about 2 decades to wrap her mind around. She said, the only way to become free is to realize we belong no place, we belong every place. The price is high, the reward is great. And Brene said, I don't like that. I don't like this idea of belonging no place. Belonging every place, that sounds good. But what she came to find out was that place of not belonging is braving the wilderness and the willingness to stand alone. And it took her a couple of decades, and then she wrote about it. And so I want to share this idea that I think is absolutely, well, I think it's what separates a boy from a man and a girl from a woman. There's many qualities that do, but I think this is one of the big ones, is the ability to tolerate that kind of tension, where then we can experience what Bruce said, 1 + 1 = 3. It's a paradox. And before I go any farther, I want to say that I want to dedicate this time together to our beloved Mary Oliver. She's probably meant more to me as a poet than anybody else on the planet, maybe outside of Whitman. But she's very Whitman-esque. And she just passed January 17th, and she dedicated her life to beauty, to praising. And the reason I mention her, other than I'm completely in love with her soul, is she wrote many poems about paradox. And I think all really devoted artists do, where that tension of opposites creates door number 3 that comes right through the middle, and something magical can happen. And I want to share a little poem of hers. It's very kind of cryptic, obtuse title, but she was known for that too. After reading Lucretius, I go to the pond. He was a Roman poet, philosopher, which has absolutely nothing to do with the poem, but it's kind of a cool title. She says, the slippery green frog who went to his death in the heron's pink throat is my small brother. I'm going to do that again. The slippery green frog who went to his death in the heron's pink throat is my small brother. And the heron with plumes of white, like me, like a crown on his head, who was washing now his great sword beak in the shining pond, is my tall, thin brother. Heron, frog, what to do? She loves them both. And this last line comes up through the middle, and she says, my heart dresses in black and dances. I'm going to give it to you again because I love it so much. The slippery green frog who went to his death in the heron's pink throat is my small brother. And the heron with plumes of white, like a crown on his head, who is washing now his great sword beak in the shining pond, is my tall, thin brother. My heart dresses in black and dances. What does this have to do with belonging? Tell me, Thomas. Only everything. I knew he was going to say that. Because when we can tolerate the tension of opposites like that, and that door number 3 can come through, that's braving the wilderness. And that's daring to be alone long enough that I might meet other wild souls like yourself that would show up on a Saturday afternoon at the Ventura Library with little black dogs, Labradors. So what gets in the way of true belonging? If true belonging has something to do with braving the wilderness, because remember, if we have the tension of opposites of authenticity and belonging, and all of a sudden I share something really a little deeper at the office, or a little deeper with my spouse, or a little deeper with my friends, and they look at me askance, say, what the hell was that? I don't think I can be around you anymore. I'm probably the only one that's ever experienced that, right? I just have to tell a short story. Some of you know it. About 2.5 years ago, I wrote a poem, and it was my first post on Facebook. I'm not apparently that into Facebook, but I posted this poem, and it was, I can't say his name, but it was about that guy that creates chaos and divisiveness. Lovely man. So this friend of like almost 30 years says, I can't be your friend anymore. It really hurt. And so I was forced to, well, I wasn't forced to do anything. I could have acquiesced and said, oh, I'm so sorry I spoke about your guy that way. Fitting in. Or brave the wilderness and stand alone long enough that I might run into some other sacred outlaws like myself, like this guy, like her, like her. And maybe, just maybe, create my own little subculture of authentic, soul-making rascals. So what gets in the way? What gets in the way of this phenomenon of having the courage to brave the wilderness of my deepest authentic self? What gets in the way? We're going to have a discussion at the end of this, so I'm reading your minds what you might be saying. Fear! Fear! Fear of what? Sorry, Charlie. I just created fear in the room. Fear of vulnerability. We're terrified of it. And strangely enough, it's vulnerability that's the birthplace of love and intimacy and trust and wacky humor and all kinds of, everything that's meaningful in our life comes from vulnerability, and yet we're terrified of it, and we don't want to go there. Crazy, huh? It's kind of crazy that the very thing that will open that up, because we're so afraid of being judged and shamed, is that word shame. In our men's work, it's like we've almost created our own theology around the shame boy, we call him. The shame boy, just like the shame girl, is different from the guilty boy or the guilty girl. The shame boy and the shame girl feels irreparably and inexorably flawed, damaged, defective. So I can't let anybody see my shame boy. Nobody can see him. So I create elaborate strategic personalities, like being really funny, or really intellectual, or I work all the time, or I'm really aloof. Why? So I can keep you back. Because I can't tolerate even the notion of you seeing my shame boy. Because if you were to see my shame boy, I might die. Feels that way. So, enter Bill Monroe. Renee talks about him. Anybody know Bill Monroe? The father of bluegrass music. Ed knows. Thank you, Ed. The father of bluegrass music. Bill Monroe, as a child, in the woodlands of the bottom part of Kentucky, along the railroad track, would witness soldiers coming back from World War I. In the early part of the 20s, like 1920, 21, 22, and they would, many of them, holler. And in their hollering was an intense cry of anguish, and at the same exact moment, an intense cry for freedom. So anguish and freedom. And this hollering that he heard as a child imprinted him so deeply that as he became a man and he devoted his life to music, that imprint of that holler entered his music, and he called it the High Lonesome. And the High Lonesome is some of the most remarkable bluegrass music that drops you to your knees and makes you want to weep, and at the same time inspires you that there might be a possibility of freedom. Now, why is that? Well, I'd like you guys to help me understand why that is. My guess is that Bill knew something that for millennia artists have known, is that when we can live what I like to call the artful life, sadness is rendered beautiful. Sadness is rendered beautiful. Loneliness becomes a shared experience. Despair transforms into hope. By making art out of your life. We've got to be careful here. We're not talking about just commercial artists. I'm talking about every one of us can live an artful life. You can live an artful life washing the dishes, by the way. When you begin to have a conversation with this thing that is feeling so dark and despairing. Well, the poet David Whyte said that as soon as he names that he's in exile, he's halfway home. Isn't that marvelous? When I begin to name my own exile, I am halfway home. So living this artful life that Bill Monroe discovered as the father of bluegrass music, I want to use as an example for all of us. And again, what does this have to do with belonging? Only everything. Again, only everything. Welcome, brother. Welcome. Why is it we love artists that can go down into the bowels of hell and language it, or paint it, or sculpt it, or dance it in such a way that we feel that shared humanity? Well, one reason is because we're not alone. We know that it is a shared humanity. And I want to say that in this present cultural climate that we live in, which I'll go as far as to say can be very dehumanizing in the present climate we're living in. We need soul activism of rehumanizing. And I got to tell you that, for me, it comes through living the artful life. The artful life has at its center beauty. Beauty. James Hillman said we can't fall in love with our lives unless our love for our life responds to something beautiful. I'm not just talking about physical beauty, I'm talking about soul beauty. So love is a response to beauty. So to live an artful life, beauty, imagination, and deep feelings. Try those three out. Radical. That's soul activism. William Blake, in the 17th century, had what he called the fourfold path. And in that, I'll just give you the third and the fourth. The third he called Beulah, which is the moonlit garden of lovers when you fall in love. And most of us, when we fall out of love, it's a big crash. I know I'm going through one right now. Anybody else go through a breakup? It's really hard. It sucks, huh? It's hard. But most of us have been conditioned to believe that when we fall out of the moonlit garden of lovers, which Blake called Beulah, that you fall all the way down to this hellish place that Robert Bly called the desert of narcissistic cold. Lovely, huh? It's lovely. The desert of narcissistic cold. But Blake said that's the south door, and most people don't know that there's a north door. So when you fall out of love, anybody know about the north door? The north door leads to what he called the shining city of art. You can make art out of your depression. You can make art out of your despair. You might make dogs howl. And I'm not sure my parents would want to hear about it. But I got a feeling that some of you in the room could relate, huh? The shining city of art. So the artful life has something to do with this deeper place of what Brene Brown calls true belonging. I like those two words together very much. There's belonging, and then there's true belonging. And I would venture to say that true belonging has something to do with the ability of braving that wilderness long enough, standing alone long enough, that you begin to meet your real brothers and sisters. Okay? So I want to share my own little poem here, my own high lonesome. And it has to do with the Shame Boy. And we might even call this Shame Boy 2, huh? Until you turn downward. Until you turn downward and reach your outstretched hand into the darkness, into that dark place where the shame boy lives. I'm going to start over. It's actually we. Until we turn downward and reach our outstretched hand into the dark place where the shame boy lives, the shame girl lives, there will be no more good days. There will be no more good days. Only hollowed out husks filled with meaningless distractions. The shame boy has been hiding beneath a rotted out log for 7,000 years. He keeps sending messages, headaches, insomnia, fits of rage and late night drunkenness. And here's the turn where the man has to turn towards the boy or the woman turns toward the girl. And I will tell you that for the last 30 years sitting with folks like Tom has, and I got a feeling there's a few of us in the room that are devoted to this healing work, this is the place where we don't know if there's enough adult consciousness in us to turn toward the shame boy, to turn towards the shame girl. And everything starts to change. Hillman said this interesting thing. The moment you know that I am not the shame boy and I have a shame boy, he said that's worth 2 years of therapy right there. So here's the line where the poem starts to shift. What's it going to take? What's it going to take to turn toward the boy? What's it going to take to turn toward the boy? This time, not with contempt. See, because contempt is a cold-hearted climate, and I guarantee you, you'll stay stuck in that cold-hearted climate. But greet that boy with a warm heart. What's it going to take to turn toward the boy? This time, not with contempt, but with a broken, open kindness. Cradling him like a baby bird in your large, benevolent hands. Cradling him like a baby bird in your large benevolent hands, and swaying with the rhythm of the wind and the stars and the trees, singing him home, singing him home. What's it going to take to turn toward the boy? This time, not with contempt, but with a broken, open kindness, cradling him like a baby bird in your large, benevolent hands, and swaying with the rhythm of the wind and the stars and the trees, singing him home, singing him home. So that's a little high lonesome. So back to Brene Brown. She's audacious enough to define spirituality in her book, which I love. It's damn good, too. I'll share it with you. She says, and if you don't like it, tell me, because let's make this something that we can all, feast on. She says, spirituality is recognizing and celebrating the inextricable connection between all of us and a power that is greater than all of us, and connecting to that power grounds us in love and compassion. Not bad, huh? Yeah. Want to hear it again? I like it very much. Recognizing, she says, spirituality is recognizing and celebrating the inextricable connection between all of us. The inextricable, it's a great word. Can't escape. The inextricable connection between every one of us, all sentient beings, and a power that is greater than all of us. So now she's talking about the invisibles. And that by connecting to that power that's greater than all of us, it grounds us in love and compassion. Well, if we're in that place, we're belonging, huh? That's belonging. Truly belonging. So, I had some ideas that could help us remember the spirituality. And you come up with your own list. I'm going to show you mine. I have about 9 of them. There's many, many more than that. But we'll start with 9. The first one is, I invite you to develop a daily sacred practice. So every day, and again, it could be washing dishes, it could be gardening, it could be yodeling, I don't know, it doesn't matter what it is, but do it every day. And the soul likes it if it's a similar time. If you pick a certain time, like mine's like 6:30 to 8:30 in the morning. It just is. So what's yours? And it doesn't have to be 2 hours like mine. I'm kind of indulgent that way. 10 minutes is good. Start with 10 minutes. So have some kind of daily sacred practice where your being is being honored and you have a devotion to your being and not your doing. Okay? The second one is find your tribe. Do you have a tribe? And I'm not talking about the fitting in folks. I'm talking about the folks you can be utterly yourself. I had a teacher one time that said, intimacy is daring to speak the unspeakable. So do you have people like that in your life? You don't need a lot of them. But you do need at least 1 or 2 or 3. The men's work that Tom and I are devoted to, we have weekly men's circles, and Tom and I are the one that's been going on, this will be our 19th year. And it's pretty terrific to have a place where you can go and be utterly yourself. I know there's many sisters in the room that have circles that have been going on for a long, long time. So find your tribe. That's essential. Another reason why you need to find your tribe is there's multiple reflections that you cannot see about yourself. that we can only experience if other people reflect them. Okay? There's parts of me I cannot see and I need your help to tell me. Some of them are pretty weird, but I need to hear it. The third one is what the Greeks call the daimon, D-A-I-M-O-N, and this is your inherent genius. This is your giftedness. And again, what does this have to do with belonging? Only everything. If you're in touch with your genius or your giftedness, it helps you belong. Not only helps you, it deepens you to the deepest part of your soul life, and then it invites other people to do the same. So the daimon. It's not celebrated in the psychology journals. We got nurture and nature, but we need to celebrate the daimon, the genius. 4, participate in the collective joy and pain of the world. Periodically, it doesn't have to be every day, but maybe every week or two. Go to a concert, go to a movie, and let yourself connect with humanity, with its crazy pain and beautiful joy, so you can connect with that humanity. The 5th one, 6th, and 7th is from a book. Do some of you know about the Book of Joy with the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu? Fabulous book. And he has this little package for cultivating joy. And the first one is, he says, which I think relates totally to our subject about belonging, he says, reframe whatever comes to you. Reframe it. Give it another context, preferably a sacred context. So reframing. 6 is gratitude. We hear that word a lot, but the reason it's so powerful is it opens up the heart. So practice gratitude. Meister Eckhart said if there were only one prayer left on the planet, it would be, thank you. Thank you. 7. In times of confusion or conflict, choose generosity and kindness. Simple. Choose generosity and kindness. Shock your family by doing that. Right in the middle of passing the potatoes. Shock them with generosity and kindness. 8, this is one of my favorite words. Ubuntu. Does anybody know it? Ubuntu. It's an African word that the best way it translates is to people becoming people through people. So we're back to the inextricable connection to all of us. Ubuntu. And my sister reminded me that the first 3 letters are UBU. UBU. Thank you, Linda. UBU-NTU, but UBU. Ubuntu. I want to hear everybody say it. Ubuntu. It's a great word. Look it up, Google it. Number 9. John O'Donohue, our beloved Irish poet, philosopher, said that we need to practice the reverence of approach. Isn't that lovely? The reverence of approach. He said the soul is actually more like a deer than anything else, and that when you approach a deer in the forest, if you don't approach it with the reverence of approach, it runs away, just like our soul does. So here's one of the loveliest things I've ever read. He said, if you walk on the earth with reverence, beauty will decide to trust you. When you walk on the earth with reverence, beauty decides to trust you. So we're back to beauty, which reminds me of John Keats saying, I am certain of nothing but the holiness of the heart's affections and the truth of imagination. What the imagination seizes as beauty must be truth. So at 23 years old, John Keats held truth and beauty on a continuum. That was his tension of opposites, truth and beauty, beauty and truth. The next time you get into an argument with your sweetheart, remember that. Are you invested in truth and beauty, or just truth? Because truth without beauty is a little harsh. And beauty without truth can be a little spineless. So we need both, don't we? There's that tension of opposites. There's the paradox again. This is where Jen Hatfield comes in. This is the moment where I want to read from Brené's book, this is what it looks like, by the way. Pick it up. It's really a worthy read. So this is a section that I want to read. I'll preface it by saying this is one of Brené's dear friends that's a minister, and she has a fairly conservative congregation, and she found herself getting deeply involved with the LGBTQ, and I understand there's another letter now that's I. This is getting long, but this is the marginalized community that we're all hearing about. And Brené, not Brené, but Brené's friend Jen Hatfield is her name, this minister, deeply was advocating this LGBTQ community, and she started to get a lot of hate mail and criticism, and she had an opportunity to cave in or brave the wilderness. And I want to read what she wrote because I think it's the heart and soul of what we're really all about here with this subject. Her name's Jen Hatfield, and she said, braving the wilderness means putting one foot in front of the other enough times, stay the course long enough to actually tunnel into the wilderness, and you'll be shocked how many people already live out there. You'll be shocked at how many people already live out there. Thriving, dancing, creating, celebrating, belonging. It is not a barren wasteland. It is not unprotected territory. It is not void of human flourishing. The wilderness is where all the creatives and the prophets and the system buckers and the risk takers have always lived. And it is stunningly vibrant, stunningly vibrant. The walk out there is hard, but the authenticity out there is life. Isn't that damn good? Isn't that just, whoa. Yes! So, this takes us as we're moving towards completion, and I really feel your presence. Thank you. Brené says that what's required to live in that place, because it isn't just braving the wilderness, she says that's actually not the goal, it's actually becoming the wilderness. So try that on. Standing alone long enough in that trembling, naked place of aloneness, because you have to be convicted to this belief of yours, these values of yours, and you're all alone, and suddenly you become the wilderness. And all these other sacred outlaws start showing up. And the dance party begins. She says, what's required here is, again, back to paradox, holding the paradox of the strong back, so imagine a real strong spine, which is courage, holding that tension with the soft front, and the soft front is loving kindness. So courage, loving kindness, tension of opposites, trembling, trembling, trembling. Door number 3, the wild heart. The wild heart is becoming the wilderness. Okay? She talks about starting a Wild Heart Club. Anybody want to join? All right, so in honor of our beloved Mary Oliver, we're going to close with her poem, Wild Geese, which is all about beauty and all about belonging and all about bravery and wilderness. The very first line of this poem will make any Catholic or any Jew tremble in a good way. And the very first line is, you do not have to be good. Isn't that fabulous? We have permission. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I'll tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the rivers and the mountains. Meanwhile, the wild geese high in the clean blue air are headed home again. Whoever you are, the world offers itself to your imagination. Whoever you are, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. Whoever you are, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. Thank you.